Hello, everyone. Nobody here. I'm just gonna wait. Hello, everyone. We got one person on here. How are you doing? 3 people on here. Hello, Matt Mick. Got 4 people on here. Basically like a dinner. Listening to music on my headphones as I do this, guys. Hello, Sister Tenacious. Hello. Privyet, everybody. Hello, comrades. We are here to fight for the Russian Empire at all cost. I'm joking. Don't take me seriously. 7 people. This is practically a party now. Oh, 6 people now. Sometimes it'll be like 7 and then it goes back to 6 and it's like, okay, somebody just got it and said, "Oh, to hell with this." Got 8 people now. Okay, we're a party now. Hope everybody is okay. The news has been crazy. Kind of. Well, actually not kind of. It has been crazy. Dead bodies, violence, misery. And an unknown species of worm called the Asian jumping worm, which has been in America for years actually, but the news has been talking about it. We have an avian bird flu, which just an outbreak of avian bird flu, but I guess we have that every single year. But the news is talking about it. Hello, Mr. Davis. Sorry, I lost my specs. Okay. Hello, Steven Rogers. Hello, EAP123. All right. Yeah, I think every year we hear about avian bird flu. They're just like, okay, there was an outbreak. They had to kill like 1,000 chickens or something, and oh gosh, you're depressed today. I hope we can cheer you up. Okay. What's the topic of discussion? Nothing really. It's a live stream, so it depends on what you guys write on the chat. I don't really prepare for these, to be honest with you. Um, I don't I don't really prepare for these things. It all really depends on what you guys write on the chat. That's pretty much what I talk about. A couple of people have died. I'm sorry to hear that, man. I'm sorry to hear that. Death is it's a very depressing subject. Um Man, I'm yawning all of a sudden. Every single day I think about death. So every day I think about it. How I'm gonna go down, how am I gonna go? That's the question I have. And sometimes I've thought, what would happen if everybody knew how they were gonna die? Like if some message came to everybody's brains that said, okay, this is how you're gonna die. You're gonna die on this date, and this is how you're gonna die. I think I think if that were to happen, people would just lose their minds. But yeah, death is a very depressing subject. I think that's the most depressing aspect of life is that it ends. Good afternoon, Scato Bethel, Scato Paido. What kind of name? I mean, I know this can't be a real name, but what's it like? What is it inspired by? Your name, Scato Bethel, Scato Paido. Is that Greek or something? I was talking to a Ukrainian guy today. He wrote me. A Ukrainian guy wrote me, and he said that I was wrong about the Russian Orthodox Church because the Russian Orthodox Church, and I know this is going to be a kind of a controversial issue, but it is a very controversial issue. But the Russian Orthodox Church, the Moscow Patriarchate, hello, Kasha, Moscow Patriarchate has ruled over the Kiev Church for a very long time. For a very long time, Ukrainians have been demanding for a patriarchate of their own that would be independent of Moscow. Now, there always has been a Ukrainian Orthodox Church, right? For a very long time, there has been a Ukrainian Orthodox Church. But for a long time, this Orthodox Church, the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, has been under the Moscow authority. 2018 comes and Patriarch Bartholomew says, okay, Ukraine can have an independent church. I have music playing on my headphones, by the way. I got to turn it off. And that's what the Ukrainians wanted. Not all Ukrainians. The Ukrainians who are members of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, I think most of them don't mind being under Moscow, and I think they prefer to be under Moscow. But what happened was that when the patriarch said, "Okay, go forth, you can have your own church," what that did was it allowed several Ukrainian schismatic groups to become one with the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, or to basically become legitimate. It would be like if someone were to say, it would be like if Pope Francis said the SSPX is legitimate, right? And the SSPX, with all of its priests and with all of its bishops, becomes aligned with Rome. Like that's kind of like the equivalent of what happened in Ukraine. Russians didn't like that because they didn't like the fact that you have Ukrainian nationalist churches now being legitimized. So the Russians said, okay, we're done with Mr. Patriarch Bartholomew. We're done with you. The Greek Orthodox Church said, we recognize this independent Ukrainian church. Russia looked at the Greeks and said, we're done with you. The Egyptians said, we recognize this independent Ukrainian church. The Russians looked at the Egyptians and said, we're done with you too. They severed ties, and they severed ties with numerous Orthodox churches. And there was this huge polarization that occurred years ago over this whole thing. And I think one of the main problems is that you have a schismatic church or you have a national. Let's be real here. Like the whole idea of a Ukrainian independent church, like a lot of this is driven by nationalism. I think all of it is driven by nationalism. And these are people who praise Stepan Bandera. These are people who praise the OUN. These are not really wholesome people. And so for that type of church and for those types of priests to become legitimized is a smack in the face for Russia. So Russia just threw its hands up. So I was talking to this Ukrainian guy about it, and he basically told me that, we have a right to have our own church. We don't have to be under Moscow. And I told him, I said, listen, the issue is not a church being under Kiev. Like, that's not my issue. My issue is churches that don't want to be under Kiev being forced to be under Kiev. Like, that's the issue I have. Well, you have nationalist gunmen going into a church and forcing the priest out, closing a church down. This is really, it's despotism is what it is. It's religious nationalism, and closing down churches, even going into a church and breaking property and attacking people. I saw a video from 2019, and it was a Ukrainian Orthodox church under Moscow, and it was being verbally accosted by a mob of nationalists. And the Ukrainian Orthodox priest said, "Glory to God," and the mob would respond with, "Glory to Ukraine, Slava Ukraina," and the priest would say, "Glory to God," and the other guy said, "Glory to Ukraine," and the priest would say, "Glory to God," and they would say, "Glory to Ukraine." This is not really religion. This is a nationalist cult that puts Ukraine above God himself. That's what it comes down to. Do you guys notice a lot of people dying more recently? Yes, actually, I have. I've noticed people dying younger, more, and that's becoming more common. I think it's becoming more common for people in their 30s and 20s to be dying of cancer. 15-year-olds getting cancer. I don't know how this is happening. Some people say it's pollution. I've heard people say it's the diet, and I think there's something to be said about that. Excessive consumption of processed foods, processed meats. I think there's something to be said about that. So yes, I have noticed that. But yes, I think it's dangerous when you have, I think it's dangerous when you have a church that that wants to split from Moscow for not really legitimate reasons. Like they want to split from Moscow for what reason? They want to be under Kiev for what reason? For the idea of a Ukrainian independent state. Okay. But why do you have to be violent? Why do you have to be forceful? Why, if people in Ukraine want to be under, if there are people in Ukraine who want to be under the Moscow Patriarchate and they don't want to be under Kiev, they should have that right. Yeah, a few of them did die from cancer. Strange thing was that they were healthy months ago. Yeah, I've heard about this happening more and more. I've heard that this is happening more and more commonly. It's becoming more and more frequent, and I don't know exactly what the cause is. I can't really pinpoint it. I've heard that I've heard different theories. I've heard that part of it is overconsumption of processed foods. I think I've heard that's a big reason behind it. Less consumption of things like herbs in the diet. In America, really in all the English speaking world, herbs are not really a thing. Herbs is kind of like maybe some parsley on a dish, that sort of thing. But there's not really an emphasis on the consumption of herbs in the American diet. And I've heard that this is not only not only one of the possibly one of the reasons why we have high rates of cancer, but because we have high rates of other illnesses such as autoimmune diseases, radiation. It could be. I don't know. Um, if you talk to people in America about herbs, they don't know anything about herbs. They don't. The herbs is like maybe a little bit of mint here, a little bit of parsley, but to tell somebody about oregano, well, oregano. Well, how do I get that? They'll go to the grocery store and they buy these, and the American grocery store doesn't really help that much either because you walk into an American grocery store and they got like a few sprigs of oregano. And by sprig, I mean like little branches with leaves on it, a few sprigs of oregano. They charge you $1.20 for it. I mean, it's actually quite expensive just for a few twigs with leaves on it. Um, as opposed to actually growing oregano yourself and then getting a really bountiful harvest out of it. So I've heard that that's amongst the reasons why we have high rates of cancer. It's the lack of consumption. And I spoke to a veterinarian about this. And veterinarians are basically like doctors. I mean, they deal with cats and dogs, but the body of a cat and dog isn't that far apart from our own. I mean, we're all oxygen breathing mammals here. And no, I'm not saying that we evolved from monkeys, but we are nonetheless similar biologically. We breathe oxygen, we have hearts, minds, brains, bloodstreams, all that stuff. And I spoke to a veterinarian, and vets do deal with cancer. They deal with canine cancer, feline cancer. And I talked to him about cancer, and I said, "What do you think what do you think is the root of cancer? Like, why are there high rates of cancer?" And he said that it's an overconsumption of things like processed meat, um, an overconsumption of deep fried foods. He told me, um, and it's not that they're deep fried that's the problem. It's the oil that we're using. We're using low level oils for deep frying, like canola oil or other seed oils that aren't very good. Um, Olive oil is the supreme of all oils. But he also told me that it's our lack of consumption of herbs. We don't have a high consumption of herbs in this country. If you look at the countries that have the highest rates of cancer, you'll see Germany, New Zealand, Australia, Hungary is a big cancer country. Czech Republic, America, Canada. These are all really big, high cancer countries. Um, one thing that all these countries have in common is that we're big meat consumers, and we don't really have a lot of green in our diet. We don't really have a whole lot of herbs. Some people blame it on cigarettes. I'm not sure how much evidence there is actually to support that cigarettes cause cancer. We've always, when it comes to cancer, we've always blamed it on cigarette smoke. Like, oh, cigarettes, cigarette. That's the big culprit, right? That we point the finger to. And I'm not sure if there's a lot of convincing evidence for that. Actually, I've heard of people who've been smoking almost their entire lives and they don't have cancer and they're old. And I've heard of people who have never smoked a cigarette in their lives and they get lung cancer. I heard about a guy, he lived in San Francisco. This guy was a big liberal. I don't know. I don't think he was a vegetarian, but he didn't smoke a cigarette in his life, and he got lung cancer, and he died in his 40s. Um, how that happened, I don't know. Cancer is kind of a mystery, but it kind of isn't. It's just yeah. But if you look at countries that don't have high rates of cancer, Okinawa has very low rates of cancer. Syria, very low rate of cancer. Syrians eat meat. They may even deep fry meat sometimes. Syria is the land of kubbe. Kubbe is a dish where, if you haven't heard of it, it's a Middle Eastern recipe where they bake ground beef kind of like a meatloaf, and then they bake it, and then they form it into like little oval shapes or little balls, and then they cover that ball of baked minced beef into they cover it with raw minced beef, and then they deep fry that. It's okay, actually. It's not bad. And they eat that a lot in Syria. And they probably deep fry it in olive oil, if I had to guess. But they don't have high rates of cancer in Syria. Um, Palestinians have, and here's an interesting observation that you can make. Interesting parallel. Palestine and Israel are right next to each other. Same climate. They live right next to each other. They're right near next door. Palestine has very low rates of cancer. They do have cancer, but very low rates. Israel, very high rate of cancer. Why is that? You have two peoples, speak two different languages, but nonetheless, they are neighbors and they live right next to each other. One has a high rate of cancer and one has a very low rate of cancer. What is the cause of this? And I've heard it said that the reason is because Palestinians have healthier diets, and that's true. Palestinians have healthier diets overall. In the West Bank, there is a high consumption of things like sage tea, rosemary tea. Um, there's a high rate of consumption of leafy green vegetables like mallow. In English, we call it mallow or marshmallow or common mallow. In Arabic, they would call this khubaizik. It's a leaf. They grow it in China also, but it's heavily consumed in the West Bank, and also in other Middle Eastern countries like Egypt. Mallow is, believe it or not, it is in the okra family. It's a cousin of okra. So if you're in the South, you know what I'm talking about. Okra, Louisianans, Texans, Alabamians, you all heard about okra. You most likely, if you do eat okra, you probably deep fry it, which isn't bad. Um, but mallow is a cousin of okra. It will produce seed pods that look similar to okra, but very very thin and very very small. With mallow, you don't eat the pods. You could, but you don't eat the pods. You eat the leaves. And mallow leaves and okra leaves are very similar in flavor, in texture, and sliminess. Mallow leaves are somewhat slimy. In the West Bank, what they do is they simply saute the leaves in olive oil, garlic, and a little bit of lemon and salt. And they eat it with a side of rice. It's a very, very common meal in amongst Palestinian people. I have eaten mallow numerous times. It doesn't taste like it tastes okay actually. If you can get past the slime, it's not bad. With garlic, some chili for some spice, a little salt, um, little bit of lemon, and it tastes really good. But that's one thing that Palestinians eat a lot of. Palestinians also consume tremendous amounts of oregano. Oregano is a huge part of the Palestinian diet. And the way that Palestinians eat oregano for the most part is by consuming a dish called za'atar. And if you go to my YouTube channel, there's a video of me actually making it. I grow a lot of oregano, and the only reason why I grow so much oregano is because I like making homemade za'atar. Now, I initially I only had like two plants. I had one marjoram plant, which is very similar to oregano, and I had one oregano plant, and that was it. And the only reason why I used it was because once in a while, when I cook something, I might throw a little bit of oregano. Make a soup, throw a little bit of oregano in it. Little tomato, white bean soup with Parmesan cheese, throw a little bit of oregano on it. Made a risotto, a little bit of oregano. And then I thought, wait a second, why am I not growing tons of oregano? So I grew tons of oregano. I bought like dozens of oregano plants. And oregano plant, you don't have to space them out. You could literally just plant them all together. And been doing za'atar for a couple of years now. And that's how Palestinians consume their oregano. And with za'atar, you dry it and then you mix the dried leaves with sumac, which is a spice that comes from a berry. It's dried berries, dried red berries that are grinded into a powder. These berries have the taste of lemon. They taste very similar to lemon, very tarty. And so you get some bitterness from the oregano, bitter earthiness from the oregano, tardiness from the sumac, and then you get a bit of nuttiness by mixing it with roasted sesame seeds, which is very good. Um, so let's see your guys. But anyway, yeah, the Palestinian diet is very different from what they eat in Israel. In Israel, they eat a lot of processed foods and they eat a lot of pizza. That's a big thing over there. Anyway, my grandpa just passed away in February. Sorry to hear that. In Poland, he was 102 years old. He drank vodka all the way till he died peacefully. See, that's the thing. People say alcohol causes cancer. How much convincing evidence there is there for that? My grandfather, on my mother's side, my mom's dad, my grandfather from Mexico, he drank a beer literally every single day without fail. When he was younger, he'd go to work early in the morning. He'd do some hard ass labor, cleaning windows, whatever he had to do. He even had a job where he had to go on the side of a building and clean the window. You know those guys that go up the buildings? They go high. They stand on a giant scalpel, and then they get on the they're on the side of the building up high, and they're cleaning the windows. Like my grandpa did that. He did a lot of hard work, and he'd get home in the late afternoon, and he would drink a beer after dinner. Like that was his thing. He drank that beer, and it was always when I was a little kid hanging out with him, it was the same beer, Budweiser mixed with V8. So he'd get a can of V8, a can of Budweiser, he'd mix it together, and then he would add a celery stalk to the cup. So he had that every day, beer, V8, and celery. Every single day, this guy had it. He died at the age of 90. He lived a long life, 90 years old. He ate a lot of pork. He ate a lot of fried pork fat, pork rinds. But he also ate a lot of things like cilantro and hot chili and raw onion and garlic. So he had a very balanced diet, I would say. Do you realize that in today's time, people are so dependent on pill? There is a pill for everything. Yes, I do realize that. America is the most medicated country on earth. I remember years ago meeting a doctor, and I asked him because I like talking to doctors. I like to ask them about the patients they deal with because they always have like really interesting stories about patients that they deal with. And he told me that a big problem that he has is people coming to the hospital and asking for a certain pill. And I'll check them. This is what he told me. He said, I'll check them out. I'll give him the evaluation. And then I'll say, listen, you don't need this pill. What you need is to go home, pop a few Advils or a couple of Advils and go to sleep. And they would say, oh, no, no, no. I need this pill, doctor. And I would say, no, you don't. I'm not going to give it to you. And they would leave upset. And he says that he told me that this was a big problem that he had as a doctor. And he told me, he said, America is the most medicated country in the world. And he said, do you know what the number one prescription in America is? I said, what? He said, Prozac. I couldn't believe it. He told me, Prozac. Americans consume Prozac all the time. Why are so many people? And it's like, This is one thing that scares me about living in America. Okay. I have always had my issues with living in the US. Ever since I was in elementary school, I had my issues with living in America. As a little kid, I used to think about these things. Um, I live in a bubble. That's just me being honest. I live in a bubble. I practically live in an ethnic enclave. When I hang out with American, and this is going to sound very strange, but it's the truth. And I'd be lying to you if I told you otherwise. When I hang out with Americans, and when I mean Americans, I'm not talking about some immigrant from Cuba, okay, who came here because he loves the Republican Party. I mean people who have been living here their whole lives. They were born here. Their father was born here. Their mom was born here. Their grandparents were born here. Their great grandparents were born here. Their great great grandparents were born here, and they can trace their lineage all the way back to whatever Danish immigrants who came here in the 1800s. When I hang out with Americans, many times I have difficulty connecting with them. And I'm not being prejudiced. This is not prejudice. This is not discrimination. This is not hatred. This is just a mere observation that I have made. I have difficulty connecting with them. Um, I just have difficulty connecting with them. Uh, when I meet with people here, when I meet with people in general, right? When I meet with people in general, I don't like talking about politics. I don't like bringing up subjects that I'm very passionate about because, from my experience, people are not interested in what I have to say. And so, if I let's say I meet some American guy and he has a visor on his head and he's out fishing, and I was in a boat with him, and maybe we were just talking or whatever, and I said, "Hey, Japan is gonna come back." They would look at me like I'm crazy. They wouldn't even believe me. So I just don't talk about these subjects because there's no point. Now, if an American guy or if anybody for that matter starts talking to me and says, "Hey, I have a theory that Japan's gonna come back," I'd be like, "Hell, brother, let's talk." But for the most part, when I meet people, I don't like talking about politics. I don't like talking about religion. I don't like talking about those things. Why? Because from my experience, people either don't care or they have views that are so dramatically different from my own that it would take a lifetime, or it just would be hair splittingly painful to have a discussion. For the most part, people just aren't interested. You know, now if you talk about football, fishing, then you can have a great conversation, and that's really what I limited myself to. I don't talk about football because I don't know anything about football. I really don't. I mean, all I know is that a guy gets a ball and he goes to the other end of the field. That's what I know about football. Um, but I can talk about gardening with people, and for the most part, people have something of an interest in that, gardening, unless they're like lawn mowing fanatics. Otherwise, in that case, they won't understand why I love gardening and why I hate lawns. I think lawns are an abomination. I hate them. Hate lawns, guys. I hate lawns. Yeah. I think everybody's front yard should be a garden. Everybody's backyard should be a garden. That's my opinion. We should all have gardens. But it's like if I talk to somebody and if I say something in regards to what I believe in about the world, geopolitics, whatever, people just don't care, or they'll say something like, "Well, I was in the military and I was stationed in Japan, and they're great people." It's like that doesn't mean anything, to be honest with you. But that's how a lot of people are. Now, years ago, in 2014, late 2014, I went to North Carolina, and while I was in North Carolina, I met with of some really good people over there, actually. And there was an African American gentleman who was a very, very cool guy. He saw me, and as soon as he saw me, he said, "Big T, Big T, Big Ted." And he said, "I watch your videos every single day, man." And that was really cool. So we sat down, we talked, and he was in the Marine Corps, and he told me that he was in the Marine Corps for 15 years. I don't think he was lying to me because the guy looked like the type of guy that would be in the Marine Corps. And he told me that when he was in the Marine Corps, he said they sent me to Japan to be stationed there. And he said it was my job to teach the younger Marines a little bit about the history of Japan, and so that they can understand it. And he said that he said I did a lot of research on Japan, and I spent a lot of time reading about Japan in World War II. And he told me, he said, I read about what them Japanese people did. Those Chinese people, he says, oh, they were the worst. And so him and I could talk about that. We could talk about Japan, have like a really interesting conversation. But yeah, I don't know. Salam alaikum. Do you think America should balkanize? Why should America balkanize for? So we could have like 7 chunks of multiple states in each one, and we could just hate each other even more. Lawns are awful. I hate lawns. I think that lawns are an abomination. Lawns are an abomination. Okay, when I look at a lawn, I see just grass. This is a little, I'll tell you, this is a little pleasure of mine that I like to do. Once in a while, I like to entertain myself, and I will go on YouTube and I will type in lawn care. If you ever have time, if you want to get a little laugh, just go on YouTube and do this. Go on YouTube and type in lawn care and go look at all these channels. I didn't know this existed until like a year or so ago. There are all these channels on YouTube dedicated to lawns. And you have these guys, and they all look the same: baseball cap, sunglasses, and a t shirt, and maybe golf shorts or something like that. And they all talk about their lawns. And they're like, what you got to do is this is how you take care of your lawn. And I swear, I saw this one guy, he had a baseball cap on. They all look like they're about to go play golf. All the lawn guys, they all look like they're about to go play golf. And maybe that's where they belong. Maybe they belong in a golf course so they can maintain the grass in the golf course. But I saw this one guy, he had a thermometer in his hand and he said, I use this. And that's the thing about Americans. Americans love their gadgets. Oh, they love their gadgets. Oh, I got this new thing over here. I got this new thingamajig. It does this one thing, and they use it a couple times, then it goes to the garage. Oh, I got this one thing. I got this one thing. I got it on this electronics store. You can go buy this thing. It does this one other thing. It does this over here. It measures it. Never ask, like, I never go on YouTube and look up how I do something in America. Like, never. I don't look at American how to do something videos. I don't. I look at British people, Australian folks, maybe even Russian folks. I don't like to look at American videos that tell you how to do something, because Americans will, what they'll do is they'll say, yeah, if you want to do this thing right, what you got to do is you got to get this here gadget, and this is going to do this for you. And they do this all the flipping time. It's so annoying. It's like, dude, I don't want to buy gadgets. Just give me a simple way to do something. But this one guy, he had a thermometer in his hand, and he was literally measuring the temperature in various parts of his lawn. I check this part of the lawn here. I check the thermometer on this part of the lawn here. I check for the temperature on this part of the lawn here, because every part of your lawn has different microclimates, and you have to keep this in mind. I'm thinking, okay, why? 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 Now, I'm all for looking at microclimates. I look at microclimates in my backyard. I don't have a temperature though. I just go by feel. I just know, like, this area gets more shade than others. This area gets more sun, so this area is going to be hotter. This area is going to be a little bit cooler. This area is under a tree, so it's going to be more breezy, more cool. So microclimates, when you're gardening, it's important to know the microclimates of your backyard, so that way you know what to plant and where to put it. Like where to plant a certain plant or a certain vegetable or a certain tree. That way you know, like, what's going to thrive where. But to do it for some freaking grass, and then they have these videos like St. Augustine versus Bermuda. They don't care about the actual St. Augustine. They care about St. Augustine grass. And like, well, this is here is Bermuda, and this here is St. Augustine. It's like it all looks the same to me. It looks like grass. It'll cut your skin up if you lay down on it too long. Uh, to me, grass is good for cows and pigs and chickens. You know, chickens eat grass, and that's how I see grass. I see weeds and grass and things like that as important for feed and for holding insects, for making a home for insects, and those insects can be used to feed uh, 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 um, animals like chickens and goats and things like that. Um, and Yeah, that's how I see it. I have chickens and they eat grass every day. They eat grass and they get vitamins and they get minerals from doing that, and that's great. You know, that's how I see grass. That's how I see it. It's feed for animals. You can also use grass as a mulch. You can rip grass up, you can rip weeds up, and you can cover the soil of your trees or your plants with it. And I've done that before, and it acts like a pretty decent mulch, actually, especially when it dries out. It's been disconnected from the earth for so long, it dries out and dies, and that makes a really good mulch. But the idea of a lawn or the idea of grass as an aesthetic to me is a mental illness. I think it's insane. I just think it's absolutely insane. And the guy who has the best lawn in the neighborhood is the biggest asshole. Okay, like that's the guy that's going to report you to the association. That's the guy that's going to complain about loud noises. That's the guy that doesn't like how your grass is like 1/8 of an inch a little too high. Like that's that. Now I don't live in a neighborhood like that, thank God. But there was this one neighborhood that I knew where they would literally come, and I've been to this neighborhood before, so I knew about the rules in this neighborhood, and they literally measure your grass. This is some serial killer stuff, guys. This is some serial killer behavior. Uh, and I don't make that up when I say that. There was a serial killer in America, of course, right? Where else? America, like, where do we have all the serial killers, right? America, Australia, England, the English speaking world. We got all the serial killers. Um, there was a serial killer by the name of Dennis Rader. This guy, when he was killing people, he was killing people on the side. But for his day job, his day job, he was a compliance officer for the local homeowners association. And he would literally go to somebody's front lawn, take out a ruler, a little ruler measurement stick, and he would measure the height of your grass. And if it was a little too high, he would penalize you. He'd make sure because you have to follow the rules. Meanwhile, he was killing people in very sadistic ways for fun. So, when it comes to rules, the most important rules to follow are the rules that tell you about lawns and grass, the height of your grass. Very, very important. But as far as thou shalt not kill, throw that out the window. I read your guys' comments. I have 6 acres of land, and there are times it feels overwhelming to maintain. Do you grow any food or vegetables on it? Fortunately, we are growing maple trees, fruit trees, and oh, maple trees are awesome. I really want to grow pecan trees. I hear that's good. You need goats. Yep, goats are a natural lawnmower. People love their grass, bro. I know. Hey Ted, what's your point of view on the recent attack in Israel? Lately there's been a lot of weird attacks in Israel. Palestinian gunmen, they killed, I think it was like 4 or 5 people in one moment, and so far I think like over a dozen people or so have been killed in Israel. I think it's because of just Islamic fundamentalism. That's the cause of it. Plain and simple. Plus, we're in Ramadan, so around this time, that's when things get violent. Have you ever Okay, have you seen the electric lawnmowers? Yep, I have. I've seen the AI ones too. Why don't you just go live in Japan or Russia or any other nation? Well, see, the thing is that I don't mind living in America. It's just that there are issues that I have with it. Okay, so I think you're right. In every country, you're gonna have issues. So I don't think there's anything wrong with having issues with where you live. You know, I've spoken to people from different countries, and they always tell me about the issues they have. So I don't really see the reason why we should just see everything as good, or I don't think we should see everything as bad either. And I don't always constantly put down America. Uh, when I was in Italy, I hated the fact that they don't have free refills. So in Mid America, we have free refills, which is the greatest thing about living in America is free refills. That's what I believe. There's a guy who mows people's lawns for free and then puts the video on YouTube. I've seen this before. Hello, John Avanti. I'll tell you what is really useless. Homeowners Association. Utterly, yep, I completely agree. Waste of money. It's an embezzlement scheme. It is okay to criticize the USA. As great as the US is, it does not do everything right. The simple way is to pray for the things to happen, Ted. I'm a car mechanic and make my own tools at times when I don't want to spend 500 bucks on a tool I will use twice. Interesting. Okay. That's good. Did you see the Salvadorian president did to the gang because he had enough of the killing? No. No, I did not. What's going on there in El Salvador? I was reading on Pakistan today. It looks like the president of Pakistan, Mr. Khan, is about to be replaced by Mr. Sharif because there's going to be a vote of confidence in regards to Mr. Khan, and it looks like they're going to be voting him out. So there's that. I don't really know all the details, but I do know that Mr. Khan was quite friendly with Russia, so that may be the reason why this is happening. What is this homeowners association? It's just basically it's like a state within a state. It's kind of like a mafia. You have a state, and the city says, okay, these are our ordinances. Okay, we can follow the city's ordinances, but no, there's something called an HOA, homeowners association, and they say, to hell with the state. We're going to make up our own rules, and you have to follow our rules, not the state's rules. Who cares about what the state says? So it's a state within a state. Speaking of death, Putin attended Zelensky's funeral today. BTK killer. Yep. Free refills are awesome. Am I gonna plant another magnolia tree? The magnolia tree doesn't bother anybody. Yeah. See, magnolia trees, you can eat the flowers. I like to grow things that grow food. So sunflowers you can eat. You can eat sunflowers, and I got a lot of sunflowers growing. And I didn't plant any of them. They literally just sprung up on their own because last year I had all these sunflowers growing, and then a lot of them went to seed, and the seeds fell, and now you have little baby sunflower plants. Um, you can actually eat sunflowers. You can deep fry them. You can braise them and eat them with some with like goat cheese or what's that cheese in Italy? It's like a white. It's not Parmesan. It's like a white creamy cheese, ricotta cheese. You can eat them with ricotta cheese. There's different things you could do with them. Why don't the world talk Turkey take over on Cyprus after Israel Palestinian issue and Russia Ukraine? I have no idea. People don't care about Cyprus, I guess. Ted Shubatsky. That's hilarious. Do not pay your HOA dues. HOA by law have the right to pool. Yep. Yep. If you don't abide by everything they say, the HOA has the right to literally put a lien on your house and you don't own your property anymore. It's even if you paid your whole house in full, the HOA can do it. And here's the thing is people say, "Well, you should have known that before signing signing on the deal or whatever." Excuse me. Let's say you buy a house and there's this dinky ass HOA that's completely insignificant and nobody even cares about. And then years later, all of a sudden you have a new board and they want to enforce a bunch of rules, or they can even vote on rules. And they say, well, you got to comply with what we have to say. It's like, well, I didn't agree to this bullshit when I got the house. All of a sudden you got to comply with them. It's bull crap. There's always something in the news that I miss. It's like I try to read the news, right? I go on like Reuters and freaking Yahoo News and all this bullshit. I'm like, okay, let me read the news. And I read through the news, like, okay, okay. And then all of a sudden someone's like, hey, did you hear about what happened in like Sweden? Damn, like there was a massacre up there. Like, what? What? I mean, something like that that should have been on every single news show.